Welcome to the second webinar in the SEG Latin America Regional Advisory Committee's webinar series, A Path to a Career in Geophysics. Today, our host will be Sergio Chavez Perez, Chair of the SEG Latin America Regional Advisory Committee, Terrell Denpaul, member of the SEG Latin America Regional Advisory Committee, and myself, Lori Weitzel. Before we begin, the model for this webinar will be a short presentation followed by an extended question and answer session. During the question and answer session, if you'd like to ask questions, please raise your hand in the webinar interface and I will adjust your settings to allow you to ask your questions directly to our presenter. Today's presenter is Victor On, who is presently a petroleum geoconsultant operating in Trinidad and Tobago. He graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Geophysics from the University of Toronto in 1978. His first job upon returning to Trinidad after graduation was as an exploration geophysicist with Trinidad Tesoro Petroleum Company, where he rose to eventually become responsible for all of the company's seismic projects in their onshore and offshore acreages. After 12 years with the company, he decided to re-engineer himself and return to the University of Toronto to pursue a Bachelor's of Science specialist program in geomatics. Upon completion, he worked in Canada in the geomatics field for a few years and then returned to Trinidad in 1997 and joined PetroTrin, the National Petroleum Company, as a senior exploration geophysicist. In 2000, he became the exploration and geophysics manager at PetroTrin, with responsibility for leading a team of some 20 geoscientists in executing the petroleum and geophysical efforts of the company. He retired from PetroTrin in 2012. He always wanted to give back to his profession, and he became a part-time lecturer in petroleum geophysics in 2001 with the opening of the geoscience program at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad. He was also a part-time lecturer in geophysics in the Master's of Science Petroleum Engineering program at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Throughout his career, he has been an active member of SEG, AAPG, and the Geological Society of Trinidad and Tobago. He was elected as president of the Geological Society of Trinidad and Tobago in 1999 and also served as the SEG country representative from the year 2006 to 2012. He also launched the student chapter of the SEG at the University of the West Indies in 2008. He is also a co-editor for the third Geological Conference Transactions of the Geological Society of Trinidad and Tobago, has authored several of the field trip and course notes for the Geological Society of Trinidad and Tobago. He was appointed a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Continental Shelf Boundary Extension Team in 2008 to provide geophysical expertise, and also served as the elected chairman of the Petroleum Historical Society of Trinidad and Tobago from 2004 to 2014. During the course of his career, he was involved with some 15 2D and 3D seismic surveys, from acquisition through the processing and interpretation, with wide experience across Trinidad in both land and marine environments. He has prospected extensively across all the geological provinces in Trinidad and Tobago and has wide knowledge of the fields and prospects in the complex basins throughout Trinidad and Tobago and the wider region of the southwest corner of the Caribbean plate. He presently offers his services as consultant to the petroleum industry in Trinidad and Tobago. And so, without further ado, please let us welcome Mr. On. Please begin.
Thank you, Lori, and welcome everybody, and welcome to my path to a career in geophysics. I can tell you that my path to geophysics was not a direct path. It was quite convoluted, and in fact, I basically stumbled into geophysics. I came through high school in the sciences and studied maths, physics, and chemistry. And I decided to work for a few years. So I worked for 1 year at the Texaco refinery in the research laboratory, simply because my favorite subject was chemistry. So I was inclined to look for work in that area. I subsequently worked with the Nestle Food Company of Trinidad in marketing and sales, primarily because the salary was much better than in the refinery. And I had no inkling at all that I would end up in geophysics. However, in 1973, my family migrated to Canada, and I realized that if I was going to progress in any sort of career, I had to go to university. And so my first option was to get into the faculty of pharmacy because of my chemistry inclination. And it didn't work out because it was such a popular career that all the places were filled up at the time I applied. And so my second option was to enter into forestry. And I got through to forestry. I chose forestry as my second option simply because Canada had so much forest resources. I felt that that was a safe option that would give me a satisfactory career and a job. So that 1973 was the first year in university in the forestry program when I did my first course in geology. And after taking that first course in geology, everything just changed for me. Everything just clicked. The geology was an applied science, and all the sciences that I had been studying before, the maths, physics, and chemistry, just came together under this subject, and I just fell in love with it. And it just was a natural, I saw it as a natural way forward. So I combined the geology that I now, for the first time, found out and was so enthralled by, and now I combine that with my physics background, and so that's why I entered into geophysics. And primarily, why geophysics? Why not just geology? Because our country is an oil country, Trinidad and Tobago. We are just on the east coast of Venezuela. We are part of the easternmost part of the eastern Venezuelan basin. And at that time, in 1973, 1974, we had a lot of geologists, but I don't think we had any geophysicists at the time. And so I felt that we would definitely need geophysics going forward into the future in our industry in Trinidad and Tobago. So that, and then my inclination and liking for physics had also developed during my first year at university. And so I decided to combine both physics and geology. And so we ended up in the geophysics program at the University of Toronto. And here I encountered some of the great professors that built my enthusiasm and my passion for the geosciences. I can tell all of you that the foundation for a career in geophysics is a good university education. And upon deciding to go into geophysics, I spoke to the advisor of the program, and he advised me that I must try and do as much geology courses as possible, because even as a geophysicist, you will need geology because of the fact that almost probably about 90%, I think he said about 90% of the time in your job and in your work, you would be doing seismic interpretation or geophysical interpretation. And that requires you to be, requires you to know geology. And so in my coursework, I decided to take as much courses in geology as possible. I point out some of the persons here on this slide who were great professors and great educators who built my enthusiasm and my passion, and they themselves are passionate people about what they teach, and they made geology exciting, interesting, and easy to understand. Professor Don Gorman, expert in mineralogy, and I can listen to him non-stop for hours. David Dunlop, Earth Geophysics. He's expert in remnant magnetization in rocks. Professor Pierre Robert taught me structural geology, which is an important subject for anybody who is going into geophysics. and especially in seismic interpretation, where you need to know structural geology. And Professor Henry Halls, who taught me geophysics. And of course, down at the bottom, there's Professor Tuzo Wills, who was the head of the faculty at the time. And he, of course, is related to plate tectonics. Everybody knew him at the time. It was a very, interesting time for geology at the University of Toronto. Professor Gordon West wrote the book, Applied Interpretation Theory and Applied Geophysics. It was a pleasure to have met him and studied under him. And then Professor Nigel Edwards, he's an expert in electromagnetism, and he's also the inventor of the control source electromagnetic method, which is very popular today. So here I am in my first job, 1978, and as you can see, I'm making map at the Trinidad Tesoro Corporation. Tesoro is a company that came out of San Antonio, and so this is the branch of that Tesoro Corporation in Trinidad and Tobago, and they have basically just taken over the leases that were sold out by BP. And so here I am on the East Coast, mapping on the East Coast of Trinidad, and we are doing everything on paper. So paper was the way we interpreted in those days, and so posting data onto the map here. I put this comment here. It is important to like what you are doing. And after coming out from university in a program such as geophysics, and this being my first job, I was excited. I wanted to use all my knowledge and to apply it. And I really liked what I was doing. I had no inkling that one day we would be doing this on the workstation and on the computer. We were doing it on paper. It was a lot of work. We had to transfer data from off the seismic sections, post it onto paper maps, convert from time to depth, and all that sort of a thing, which is easily done now on a workstation. But I enjoyed every bit of it. And so in addition to liking what you do, I think it is important to also have good people who manage your progress in the company. And I was working under a very good exploration manager by the name of Kenneth Birchwood. And he basically empowered me to become a better geophysicist, because coming from university, you are just equipped with some of the basics of the job, and you still require much training on the job. And so he provided me with many projects to work on, and he also provided me with the training that was required in order to do those projects to the best of my ability, knowing that I came from the BSc program at the University of Toronto, but there was still much to learn in order to become competent as a geophysicist. In addition, very early in my career, I was very fortunate to have encountered someone who became sort of like my mentor in geophysics. And this was Steve Getz. I worked with him from 1981 to 1982, basically 2 years on a 2D seismic interpretation project across the entire Trinidad acreage, which is the Gulf of Paria. It's the acreage which contains one of the giant oil fields of Trinidad, the Soldado oil field offshore, one of the big giant fields of Trinidad, in addition to the Forest Reserve field onshore. And so it was a pleasure to have met Steve, and he trained me to become a real good geophysicist by working under him doing paper interpretation. And what I learned primarily from Steve was how to organize yourself as an interpreter, because you have hundreds of lines that you are working on large sheets of paper, which you are then posting data, interpreting and posting that data onto maps. And you have this little office in which to do all of this. And he had a system in which he would write the numbers large on both sides of the seismic section, so that they are easily identifiable, whether it's laid out open or whether it's rolled up. And you can see the number very easily. And with hundreds of sections on the floor all around him, he had a method in which he used to place the section so that he can always dip down and get the seismic section that he wanted without too much searching. And so that type of organization and those little things that you need to know to become perfect in doing your work as a geophysicist, how to deal with large amounts of data and so on, were very helpful. And he was also he passed on a lot of his knowledge about prospecting. He talked a lot to me about overpressure and what that means to the various prospects in the area. So one of the maps he always used to map was the top of overpressure in most of the projects that he would undertake. And that would then lead him to find prospects. So he was also teaching me some of the little secrets and the little, the things that he had learned over the years, his own experience. He was passing on to me his expertise. And I was just glad to have been there with him. So I think we should always be willing to learn from other people. Throughout my career, I think perfecting my knowledge and trying to become better at what I do was important, because very early in Tesoro, I had a chief geophysicist to work under for just a couple of years, and after that I was on my own. And I basically realized that I had to really self-educate myself, to become the geophysicist that I wanted to become. And being in one of the leading edge technologies, seismic technology, which we use a lot in the petroleum industry, the onus was on me to become up to date with the technology, to know what was the most recent things that are happening, and to be able to apply those technologies to the job. So I just list here some of the pertinent things that need to be remembered. You need to of course do many projects, because with every project you learn more and more, and you gain exposure more and more to the geology that you are working in. The island of Trinidad is very complex, and exposure to that geology through the seismic sections and through projects was mind-boggling and a challenge. And it was a way to build my experience and build my expertise in interpretation. Then having pertinent continuing education courses is another aspect of my self-education. And of course, my manager saw to it that we went to at least 2 every year. Also, the AAPG, the American Association of Petroleum Geologists, and the SEG, Society of Exploration Geophysicists, were sources of information for professionals in geology and geophysics throughout the world. And some of their publications and many of their courses I had attended, and they were also sources of information. But I highlight here in the yellow box the Geological Society of Trinidad and Tobago, because whichever country you work in, where you have studied, it would be nice if you study in the country that you are eventually going to work in and learn the geology while you are at university. But Trinidad geology is very complex, and so even with knowing that, you still may not know all the geology, and so it is important to join your local geological society and to attend field trips, to go out into the field, and to make every effort to learn the local geology, and to also do pertinent project-related field work, to go into the area where you are interpreting and look at the outcrops and look at structural clues and so on that you may see in those outcrops. A very important part of your interpretation and building your expertise in interpretation would come from this type of knowledge of the geology. And so my background, where I did a lot of geology courses, was very appropriate for me to embark on these types of field trips and go to these conferences and so on. And then, of course, relevant technical papers and books, and then, of course, working until you become competent with the tools of the trade. Here's a copy of the Geological Map of Trinidad, and as you can imagine, this is essentially the north-south distance that you are looking here is essentially about 60 kilometers. and similarly about 60 kilometers from east to west. And in this small little island, 60 by 60 kilometers, there are three mountain ranges: the northern range, the central range, and the southern range. So you can imagine how complex the geology is in Trinidad. We have metamorphic rocks in the northern range. This is the boundary, the southern boundary of the Caribbean plate that you are looking at. This mountain range stretches all the way across into Venezuela. And it is the northern coastal mountains that extend across into Venezuela and reaches all the way to the Andes. So it's the southern boundary of the Caribbean plate. This is volcanic rocks here in the northeastern corner, and there's a sutured fault where it is joined onto the landmass of Trinidad. But we feel that this is a piece of the Caribbean plate that got left back here and joined onto Trinidad. It's the only volcanic rocks that we have in Trinidad. There are no volcanoes in Trinidad. So this is the proposed theory that we have for the origin of this volcanic rock in that area. And then the rest of Trinidad is sedimentary basin, but highly deformed. And along the Los Bajos Fault, one of the major migration pathways in the island, we have many of our large fields. The forest reserve, the giant forest reserve field, is situated in this area along the Los Bajos Fault. So knowing the geology was very important in my career, and learning the geology with field trips and so on was very important. In addition, I would also say to most people in geophysics, I found myself at the middle of my career where we were about to embark into 3D surveys, and we were talking about workstations and software, and the whole science of geology is becoming computerized. I found myself lacking in certain areas. We were now talking about technologies like GPS that we were using on seismic surveys. When I go out to bird dog and so on, I used to be perplexed and didn't understand much of that area. So I felt I needed to re-educate myself. I needed to get up to it, get up to date with the computerized technology, and also to understand the surveying aspect, the positioning aspect, which is such an important part of our bird dogging work. And I felt that I needed to go back and learn about it. So here I am at the University of Toronto for 3 years studying to fill the gaps in what I felt was what I was lacking in my career at the time. I also undertook some geology courses. Here's Professor Dave Kobloch, who is a carbonate geology specialist. And so again, very interesting people who made geomatics and who made geology interesting and a joy to listen to them and to have been a student under them. I move on now again to elaborate on on what is ground truth, because having done my geomatics, I think what that did for me was really probably for the first time to bring me to the realization of what scale is and the magnitude of scale on the earth, and especially for the island of Trinidad and Tobago, the magnitude and scale of our geomorphology. And so I felt now that I was equipped and knew more and more about positioning and geomatics and geology and geophysics, that I could now undertake and pay more attention to what is out there, what is ground truth, and to become more familiar with time slice zero, which really, as you all know, the present is a key to the past. And so here I am with field outcrop, and we are looking, just interpreted the outcrop in the lower part of the section. And as you can see, tremendous density and complexity of faulting, branching type of fault that are typical of strike-slip tectonics. And we are in a strike-slip zone at this particular outcrop. And here's the seismic section that I would have interpreted from looking at that data and from the knowledge I have of the field and what is going on, I think, in the field. to be able to do that kind of interpretation on the seismic section. And another example here is overturn and decline, which we see in the microstructure, probably about a 6 foot by 6 foot section you're looking at here in photography. And here is a barafore field, a similar overturned and declined, very similar to that kind of what we saw in the microstructure. Now you are seeing that here in the macro seismic section and of the barafore field. So ground truth is important. Knowing the local geology is important. But in addition to that, I think as a professional, you must always also have principles to abide by. And so the code of ethics of the Society of Exploration Geophysicists was always something that I abided by. In particular, number one, to carry on your professional work in a spirit of fidelity to clients and employers, fairness to employees and contractors, and devotion to high ideals of personal honor. And then the last one, to interest yourself in the public welfare and be ready to apply your special knowledge, skill, and training in the public behalf for the use and the benefit of mankind. And so I think as professionals, we must have a certain amount of integrity and ethics by which to live by. Laurie talked about all of these, but in the latter half of my career, I wanted to give back to the profession. I've worked on so many seismic projects over the years. I've now become the manager at the local oil company, at the state oil company of Petrotrin. And at that point in time, I felt I had to give back to the young people. Just as I, as a young student, learned from Professor Gorman and all those others, J. Tuzo Wilson and so on, I think I owe it to the young people of Trinidad and Tobago to pass on some of my knowledge to them. And so I spent a lot of years, essentially from year 2001 to 2012, basically teaching young students petroleum geophysics at the University of the West Indies and Trinidad and Tobago. Also, giving back to your profession, some of the things that I think doing technical papers, trying to elaborate and reveal some of the geology that is not revealed, that only you as a geophysicist can show. Here I am extending the geological map into the offshore of the west coast. This is the island of Trinidad in blue outline, and I'm using seismic technology to extend the geological map of Trinidad into the offshore. And so to help and to further the knowledge of the geology of your area, I think you also need to do that. And so I come to the last slide. I have a few quotations here, which over the years I have come to abide by, and I've come to always hold up high. One of these is just a definition that a map is a representation of the earth. And I think a lot of us have never really seen that definition, but I think it is a realization that all of us, because the map is our deliverable. And sometimes as a geophysicist or a geologist, when we make maps and it is finally colored up and drafted and it's all looking pretty and so on, we think that is the end of it. But that map is only a representation of the earth. And we must continue to seek the geological truth in the areas where we work. And so again, I stress the importance of field work. I stress the importance of knowing the local geology and getting out there on the ground with time flight 0 to learn what is ground truth and to apply what is ground truth to the maps, to continue to correct your maps throughout your career. In terms of discoveries and prospecting and so on, Mother Nature is extremely creative. If you go out into the field, you will see the principles of physics being applied and faulting and deposition taking place in this basin, in this complex area of Trinidad and Tobago. And it is amazing what Mother Nature, the creativity and the complexity of Mother Nature in Trinidad. And I have found in many of the instances, people have given up oil leases in Trinidad, left it and walked away. And the next person that came along find a huge find and a huge discovery there. And really, I believe that the voyage of discovery is not in seeking new leases or new landscapes or new blocks, but in having new eyes. And I pull this from a literary person, Marcel Proust. So at the end, I am humble. I've enjoyed my career in geophysics. It was interesting. I never had a dull moment. It's given me a livelihood, and every moment has been interesting, has been passionate, has been enjoyable. But I remain humble because at the end of the day, I still do not know what is there in the ground. I still do not know the geological truth, and I'm always willing to learn. And as Jesus Christ says, "Blessed are the meek, for you shall inherit the earth." And I hope that one day, if me and you, all of us who are in the field of geophysics, if we continue to be humble and to say that we do not know and continue to always learn and improve and try to better ourselves and better the knowledge and better our geology, we will one day inherit the earth. So I thank you very much. That brings me to the end of my presentation. So any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Ahn. That was a wonderful presentation. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand in the interface, and I will move you so that you can ask your questions directly. I guess I'll start. I have a question, and probably a challenging question, because I'm going to put you on a spot a little bit and ask you, what was the biggest challenge you encountered during your entire career? Now, that's a pretty broad question, but it kind of tries to force you to pick like one, which is hard. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, as a geophysicist, we went to university and we became, we became proficient at the science of geophysics and so on. But most of the challenges that came my way in my career was not really in the science of geophysics, because I think we are making progress daily in that area. The challenges I faced was the challenges that came from people. And as a geophysicist, doing geophysics at University of Toronto, I never had the inkling that I was one day going to be running seismic surveys across Trinidad and interacting with hundreds of people in the public and dealing with disgruntled landowners who are saying that my seismic explosion has just destroyed and cracked up their house and all this sort of a thing. And so dealing with people, dealing with those complaints in the furtherance of the work of your company and trying to conduct seismic surveys, which is required in order for you to look into the subsurface. In order to do that, you have to be able to understand and be able to deal with people problems of that sort. And it can be very challenging if you are not ready for it, because these people really think that you have destroyed their homes. And so you have to, I point you again to the last quotation, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." I always try to be humble when I talk to the public. I always try to listen, and then I listen again to them. And at the end of the day, I have to seek a compromise between what the company is willing and is able to do, and what the public is demanding from me, and to seek a win-win situation in that. And that, I can tell you, Laurie, is a difficult thing to do. And you have to do it many times during a seismic survey to many people, and sometimes a small island like Trinidad, those are people that you know. So it is it is one of the biggest challenges that I, as a geophysicist, face. And I think most people who go into geophysics, the people problem is a big issue.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for Victor? Oh, Okay, hang on. All right,
Hello?
Terrell, go ahead.
Yeah. I don't have a question per se, but I just wanted to thank Victor personally and publicly for doing this lecture, webinar. Vic, I know it took a lot of from doing and getting in terms of arranging the time and stuff to do this lecture. So I'm sure that some of the younger ones, the young geophysicists or budding geophysicists will appreciate your experiences and the convoluted map that you showed in terms of how you got to where you actually culminated your career as the exploration manager at Petrotrin. So thank you again for your efforts in doing this webinar today.
It was my pleasure, Terrell. I am always glad to share my knowledge with anyone. I have met people all my life who have been good to me. People like Getz, Ken Birchwood, my professors at university, those who have given their knowledge and given up their time to make geology interesting and geophysics interesting. And some of those topics are not easy to make interesting. And I benefited from them, and it is my pleasure to pass on whatever knowledge I have and whatever secrets or whatever tricks of the trade I have learned, I will be glad to pass on. And I hope that during this presentation, some of you would have benefited, and so that you can go on in your careers and continue to seek the geological truth in the areas where you work, and continue to always not look for new blocks or new leases, but to continue to seek, have a new vision and to have new eyes as you look at the same old data that you have always been looking at. I hope that you will always you all will continue to find prospects even in the old leases that you still have. Thank you very much.
All right. I have one final question. Working in the field can be interesting, and unexpected things come up. And I was curious if you had any unusual but funny sort of situations when you were out in the field with your crews and collecting data.
Yes, yeah, there are many interesting stories of being out in the field.